cord to the cloud. Okay. Welcome to another issue of It Sports Magazine TV. Oh, am I excited, can you tell? Today we have Michael Schulze, who's Director of Communications and Sponsorships for the Outback Bowl. And I'm very excited about this. I met Mike, probably 3-4 decades ago when we were both goals at the University of South Florida. I think he was an intern. He was a Green Jacket ambassador. That's how far back we go. And boy, what a great guy he is. We've stayed in touch the entire time. And I'm just so happy on what he's doing now. Mike, can you give us a quick version of what Mike Schulze is all about?
Well, that could take a while, but I'll tell you what. You're right in your timing. I met you when I was at the University of South Florida. I was originally a student there, and then I was a student assistant for the basketball program there back in the early 80s. It's 1980s, and working with the basketball program and Coach Lee Rose and all the success they had early on, and then later went to work in their athletic department as in their fundraising division for athletics, the Athletic Association they call it. Was working with that for a while, and then later moved into operations for the athletic program. Would be in charge of like all the tournaments that we'd host or any conference meets or tournaments that any of our sports would be involved in. I handle all the fundraising events for athletics. Just a lot of different aspects. I was the operational person for all the men's basketball games. They didn't have football at the time, so. But and then eventually I ended up going to work for the Outback Bowl, which at the time was the Hall of Fame Bowl when it first started, and have been there now for quite a while. So it's been a very long stretch working in sports in the Tampa Bay market, the USF, and I also dabbled in some positions with helping out with the senior golf tournament here for a while. Handling their media operations. I worked Tampa Bay Bandits games, Buccaneer games, a lot of different things that have taken place over the years, sports related in the community. So it's been a fun ride.
Well, that's good, and the best years ahead. I really want to start before I let Rob ask you the next question. I wanted to introduce our panel. Of course, Leo Haggerty, who's our editor-in-chief of It Sports Magazine. He's an icon by himself here in this community. And then also Rob Kreit, he's a senior assignment editor. And then we're glad to have Adam Schnauzteiler. He's a columnist, and he's helping us with our social media. Then we have Abby Hope, who's an intern from the University of Tampa. They have a program out there of sports management. So I really want her to connect with you because you'll be a great contact for her. So that's
absolutely. I for many years spoke to their sports administration classes there for many years. So I haven't been invited recently, so I must not have done a good job. But
well, one of her best attributes is that she's a starting member of the women's lacrosse team over there at the University of Tampa. Now, I don't know if you remember, I started the lacrosse team at USF. So without any further ado, Rob, why don't you ask our great guest, Mike Schulze, the next question?
Well, hey, Mike. Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Rob Creed here. I'm the senior writer at itsportsmagazine.com. You already mentioned that you've been with Outback, the Outback Bowl for a while. How many years is it?
Well, I just celebrated last month. I celebrated 32 years on the staff. I actually, the bowl game has been around for 35 years, 35 games. I actually worked with the bowl game the first few years as a volunteer during bowl week with the PR person that was there at the time. And I would come in and work the week of the game and up through the game, helping with the media, hotel, and the media operations, and working the press box for the game. So I've actually worked all 35 games, but I've been on full-time staff now for 32 years, working in the media relations, sponsorships, and a lot of other areas of the bowl game. So it's been a fun ride, and I've seen it come a long way. The first when the bowl game was started, there were only about 13 bowl games in the country. Today, there's somewhere around 40. That's a whole story in itself, but it's been really interesting seeing the process of postseason college football over the last 3 decades.
That's awesome. And you mentioned sponsorships. You got the Outback Steakhouse signed through 2026. Yeah. How does having that relationship with the Outback Bowl, the continuity, really help to the allure of the game and what you guys
Well, it's really been fabulous. The bowl game, as I mentioned initially, was called the Hall of Fame Bowl because it was affiliated with the College Football Hall of Fame as a benefactor way back when. And in 1985, 86, the Outback Steakhouse was really a somewhat young restaurant company. They had, they were starting to expand nationally, and they really wanted to expand even further nationally and internationally. And they saw that the title sponsorship of the bowl game, like ours, would give them some real good brand awareness and exposure even into markets they hadn't entered yet. So at the time, there were about 200 restaurants, I think, at that point. And today, of course, there's around 1,000 Outback Steakhouses, plus they have many other concepts as well. So it's been a great marriage, if you will, between the two in regards to our growth as the bowl game and the growth of Outback Steakhouse. They just celebrated their 26th year with the bowl game, and as you mentioned, our current contract has 5 more years on it. So, and they are already the longest title sponsor of any college bowl game in history, and at 26 years. So it's been a real feather in our hat, and it's been a great thing to have the continuity of having a title sponsor with when so many, virtually almost every other bowl game in the country obviously has not had that kind of continuity anywhere close to that. There's bowl games that have been around longer than us even that have had almost a dozen or 10 or 12 different title sponsors over the years. So having them be a part of us and us be a part of Outback Steakhouse has really worked really well for both of us, I think, and it's been a great relationship, and we're looking forward to continuing it.
Yeah, that's amazing and something to be really proud of, and kind of cool, actually, I think. But hey, Mike, you've also secured teams from the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference as participants. Does having a guarantee of 2 Power 5 conference squads enhance the draw of the Outback Bowl?
Yeah, it really does, and from the standpoint, it gives you some continuity again in what you're able to provide to the fan base, especially from a local standpoint. The local fans here who are college football fans, right? You're asking them to buy tickets throughout the entire year, renew tickets or whatever, and they know that okay, we're going to have teams from 2 really strong Power 5 conferences, not just Power 5 conferences, but arguably the 2 most popular in the history of the sport, from top to bottom. And so, understanding that they're going to see, programs from those conferences come in each year is really important. As I mentioned, going back to the start of our game, back when we started, really for all the games in the country, with the exception of the Rose Bowl and I think the Orange Bowl at the time, those were the only 2 that even had any kind of conference tie-ins. Nobody else really did. So it was really a free-for-all, free market out there. And it was neat. I mean, we were able to get some different teams in, from different conferences and all that. But it was interesting because, every year, even going down the wire at the end of the season, you had no idea what school you could have in a game. I mean, it could be Clemson, it could be Ohio State, it could be UCLA, Arizona, who knows who we're going to get, right? And so, as the process sort of continued through the bowl games and postseason college football, the conferences, really wanted to have a little bit more continuity to understand what tie-ins they were going to have with which bowl games, and also from the standpoint of how much money they were going to get from the bowls to share with their schools. And so the schools couldn't really budget any bowl revenue because they had no idea how much money they were going to make from bowls through the conference. And so the conferences decided, hey, let's, like the Big Ten, SEC, they said, hey, let's lock in with some different bowl games that we know we want to be a part of, and that our teams are going to want to be a part of. And then they're going to have like a guaranteed payout, so we'll know how much money we're going to get from the bowl games. So then, the conference and the schools can budget, knowing that they're going to get a certain X amount of dollars from the bowl games every year that we're affiliated with, and they know that they're going to be able to go to these really good bowl games. And so it sort of expanded from that over the years, and us being able to lock in even at that early stage, again, arguably the 2 most popular conferences in college football history, and people and fans to know that they were going to see those types of teams in our game every year has really helped us, achieve a level that I think nobody really thought we could early on, and we've carried that on now for a very, very long tradition, and it's really helped us with getting a title sponsor and Outback Steakhouse and our TV network deals and everything like that. So because it all depends on what product you have, right, to put on the field. And so knowing that we have a great product every year, that helps us with our TV contracts, helps us with our title sponsorships and our other sponsorships. And therefore, it helps us be able to be successful and continue on in this bowl game year after year.
You know what, Mike? I think I know the answer to the next two questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway. In your mind, what's the best game that was played at the Outback Bowl, and what's the most memorable play?
Oh gosh, well, see, the unfortunate thing of being with a bowl game for 35 years is that there's way too many choices there. We've had some phenomenal games, and we've had some phenomenal plays. We've had over 1,000 players go on to the NFL that played in our game. So many different moments. I would pick one of the moments as far as a game. Again, we've had so many good ones. One of them was one of my favorites was Auburn Northwestern back in, I think it was 2010. It was just a phenomenal game. Both teams ran spread hurry up offenses. I remember one of my duties is a liaison to the production team for the TV network that covers the game. And I know one of the things that we talked about in the walkthrough a couple days before the game is that they were concerned about not being able to show replays because the teams snap the ball so quick. And I'm not talking about what they do today, where they line up really quickly and then they stand there and look over the sideline for 30 seconds waiting for a play. I'm talking about they line up and they snap the ball. And as a point in fact on that, in this particular game, to this day, it's still an NCAA record. Northwestern had 115 plays in that game. They threw the ball 78 times. Auburn had 89 plays in that game. I mean, we're talking about over 200 plays, snaps of the ball. And not only that, but there were so many huge plays in that game. I remember in the first few minutes of the game, Auburn player McFadden, he intercepted a pass in the end zone and returned it 101 yards. Of course, it only counts as 100 yards in college, but he returned it actually 101 yards for a touchdown. So it was a pick six for 101 yards. Nobody at the end of the game even talked about it because there were about 20 other plays in the game that were more memorable than that one, if you can imagine. But in a nutshell, that game went down to overtime, and at the end of the game, Auburn had held Northwestern. They had kicked a field goal, and so Northwestern, had the ball, and they were down first and goal from the 10. They held them for 3 plays, and then Northwestern went to kick the field goal. They go to kick the field goal. They miss the field goal, but the kicker gets run into. So Auburn thinks they won the game. They're rushing the field, and they're like, no, there's a flag running into the kicker. So they get another first and goal. So they go back, reset. Auburn stops them again for 3 plays. And on 4th down, they line up to kick a field goal, except that the kicker broke his leg on the play before when he was run into. And so they put a backup kicker out there, and they end up running a fumble-rooski trick play to try and score to win the game. And it almost worked, but the defender from Auburn did a 360 to turn around and try and get the guy and push them out the 1 yard line. And what I tell people, what was so great about that game, one of the amazing things is because of the number of plays, is that one of the most phenomenal things to me was that the Auburn defense had to be on the field for 115 plays. And at the end of the game, that guy made that play after being on the field for 115 plays. I mean, that was pretty phenomenal. As far as an actual individual play, the hit by Jadavian and Clowney, Michigan versus South Carolina, 2013 was just a game, a play to be, remembered for decades ahead. I mean, that was just an incredible play. It was a legal hit, He plowed through the line, and it was actually a missed call by Michigan's offensive line. The guy who was supposed to block him, they were supposed to run this kind of stunt to block him, and nobody blocked him. And he came rushing through the line. And as the Michigan running back received the handoff, right as he received the handoff, Clowney just barreled into him, blew the whole play up. The ball gets fumbled. The player goes backwards. His helmet goes 10 yards backwards off his head. And Clowney falls on the guy. And as he's falling on him, picks up the ball with his left hand. So he recovers the fumble, breaks up the play. South Carolina goes on to win the game on a touchdown pass in the final 30 seconds of the game. And it was just a phenomenal play, obviously, that turned the entire tables around. And that play was singularly responsible, I think, for making Jadeveon Clowney the #1 pick in the NFL draft a year later.
You know what, Mike? Night Sports Production and Its Sports Magazine has been credentialed for over 20 consecutive years with the Outback Bowl. You and the CEO of the Outback Bowl, Jim McVeigh, have been extremely generous with your time to both of our groups. What's it like working for Jim?
Oh, he's phenomenal. I mean, it's really amazing. He comes from such a diverse and deep sports background through his family tree and the things that he's been a part of over the years, from International Hockey League to the USFL. He was the marketing director for the Tampa Bay Bandits, and then he was director of administration for the Buccaneers. And he's got so many contacts, but more importantly, just the fact that he has really he sees the big picture, and he sees so far ahead of everybody else typically. And he understands, how to take an organization and run it as a business to the point of being really successful. And the bowl game, actually, when he came on board, was really struggling financially the first few years because they didn't really have a game plan, so to speak. And he came in and said, "Okay, we're going to straighten this up. We're going to make it a success." And he's done that. And so it's been really interesting to learn under him and to watch. How he does things. There's a lot of other bowl games around the country for many years, and I'm talking about big name games, have reached out and asked him for his take on different things, and he's always one of those guys who has the foresight to look at issues and understand them before a lot of other people maybe do, before they recognize what's around the corner. And so he's really been a great asset from that perspective. The bowl game would not be anywhere near the success it is without him at the helm. I'm very convinced of that.
You know what, Mike, with the pandemic and COVID, was there some concern within the Outback Bowl administration that the bowl may be canceled, possibly because the Big Ten wasn't even playing until October?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when it first happened, we were really, in a mode where we didn't know what was going to happen down the road, right? When the lockdowns happened and so forth. And, the good thing from our perspective was that, we were a bowl game that's going to be at the tail end of the college football season, right? So we weren't the ones who were going to have to figure out, okay, how are we going to start college football again, right? We didn't have to really come up with how are we going to kick off the season? Are we going to have a season? We knew that the powers that be in college football were going to have to work out a system in a way to see if there was a way to play college football. If they could do that and be successful, then there might be a chance there might be a postseason in college football. And so we were just really the hardest part for us is that we were sort of at the mercy of time from the standpoint of really having to sit and wait, if you will. Not that we didn't do anything, but just from the standpoint of really not having a definitive answer as to whether we would be able to play or if anybody would even want to play a college football bowl game at the end of the season. So we had to wait to see, they came up with these plans. They're going to play. They're not going to play. Now they're, okay, now they have plans for the season. Okay, now they have plans for how they're going to kick it off. So we had to wait and see, okay, maybe we'll see how that goes. And the season starts, and the first few weeks go pretty good. So then, okay, it looks like maybe they'll get through more of the season. Then it's like, okay, maybe they'll actually get through the entire season. But then there was still that question out there as to, are the teams really going to want to play a postseason game and go to a bowl game? And at the same time, obviously, like everyone else, financially, it was really hurting us, and because we weren't able to sell sponsorships and tickets and things like that to drive revenues. So we were like in a position where we weren't going to really have the same financial model as we normally do. So we were going to have to try and figure out, what we could do and what we couldn't do. We had to cancel all of our events. We knew that was going to happen, so we had to cancel all those eventually. And so then again, we went back to, okay, are the schools going to really want to come to the game if they don't have their bowl week events, the week of activities and the fun things that make it a really neat bowl experience? The financial contracts are going to have to completely be reworked, because of our financial situation. Again, I'm talking about all the bowl games, not just ours. And so, there's just that unknown factor of not really understanding if you're going to be able to really line things up, to where people were going to want to play and they were going to agree, to a new set of standards. And then, of course, once we finally got to that point, which really wasn't until December, so less than a month before the game, even when we got to that point, and we actually had teams assigned, or selected for the game, we didn't know if we were going to kick off, because if one of the teams gets a bunch of COVID cases, the whole thing's off. There were 19 bowl games this past year that were canceled, and a couple of them were canceled within 48 hours of when they were supposed to play. And so we're sitting there, we finally get to teams, we got Ole Miss, we got Indiana, we felt really good about that. We said, okay, we're not going to have events. We had to change the way we did everything around the game. We had to change everything leading up to the game. And we said, okay, if we can at least just have a game, that would be great. And so we worked to that end. But again, they were testing the players bowl week leading up to the game, every other day or every day. And it wasn't until we finally got the final test results back from both teams the day before the game that we knew, okay, we're actually going to do this and we're going to play. Because at any point to that, up to then, the whole thing could have been caught off, and we'd say, oh, well, you did all this work for nothing. We'll come back next year. So that was the toughest part.
Yeah, Mike, you talk about having to call off all the events bowl week.
Yeah.
Your signature event to the sponsors and people that get involved is the gala. It is an amazing event. That had to be a disappointment. I know it's a disappointment to the Haggerty family because we attend it every year.
Well, that it was really all the events. I mean, because one of the things that's really neat about a bowl game, and this is the thing you don't have like with a playoff, for instance. And the playoffs different for different reasons, obviously. But a bowl game is supposed to be, and we're one of those traditional bowl games that were started by a community organization, a not-for-profit organization that was started to benefit the community, to give money to universities, to create exposure for the marketplace, and just do have a great experience for the student athletes, the coaches, the players, and the fans of the two schools that are coming in from all over the country. And so we're in the hospitality industry business, if you will, and so and we're in the entertainment business. And so when you ask us to, okay, we put on the game, but you can't do anything around it. You can't have that bowl week experience. You can't have, players come down and go to beach day or go to Busch Gardens and feed the giraffes behind the scenes, or visit kids at the local hospital to cheer them up, or you don't have fans, going out to Clearwater Beach or going to Ybor City for a New Year's Eve parade. All those things that make the experience around the game so much, so memorable, and such a big part of what we do. And so not being able to have those things, and the gala, as you mentioned, is one of our biggest VIP events that we do. It was really sad, from our perspective. But again, we're in a pandemic, and you have to look at the reality of the fact that, hey, this is the way it is. I mean, this is serious stuff. And so we're just going to have to do what we can do. And like I said, we're at least very, very pleased that we were able to at least put on the bowl game and give people an escape, whether by TV or in-house, for a few minutes to watch a college football bowl game, and maybe forget about all the troubles that are out there around us.
Mike, let's talk about the great thing that the Outback Bowl does, and that's donating money to charities, especially the local charities. Talk about how much you've given so far to charities throughout the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah, that was an initiative. The bowl game, all bowl games are started, for the main purpose of creating an economic impact for the community. And we've been doing that for many, many years. I mean, again, 35 years. We estimate our economic impact on the community at over $1.1 billion over the time. We've also generated $158 million to universities. And that money, by the way, the payouts from the bowl games are divided among all the schools in the conferences, and so they all get a share of that. So we're really proud of that. But the exposure and the impact on the community is the key element of it. But we decided a few years ago that it's like we want to try and do even more than what we've been doing. We have a great impact on the community. We showcase the community nationally, internationally. But what can we do? What else can we do to really help this community? And so we started a charitable giving initiative 5 years ago, and we have to date donated over $2.5 million and committed at least $500,000 every year to give to local charities. And so far we have given monies to over 135 local organizations. And some of these are national organizations, but with a very large presence here. And the key for it is that we wanted to be able to reach organizations. Many of them are localized or regionalized, and they're smaller organizations, many of them, because that don't really get a lot of fundraising, that have trouble raising funds to do the things that they do. Wheelchairs for Kids is a great example. They're located in Pinellas County. They have some lady years ago realized that there's all these kids out there who don't have the means to be able to get specialized wheelchairs. And when I say wheelchairs, some of them provide mechanisms where kids can like stand and sort of move around in a standing position and not just sitting in a typical wheelchair, but customized to their bodies and their needs and things like this and all that. So and so she's out there helping 200 families or children that wouldn't have the means to be able to have a decent wheelchair, for instance, and things like that. I mean, that's just one set of over 135 organizations that we have supported, that we found that exist, that many of which we never even knew existed until we started this program. And we see the need out there, and so many of these organizations doing really great work on the front lines. And then this past year we were really excited and committed, I should say, I guess, to during the pandemic, when we didn't know if we were going to have a bowl game or not, we said, regardless of that, we've made a promise that we're going to give out $500,000 a year to charities, and we're going to do that this year even if we don't have a game. And if we don't bring in $1 of revenue, we're going to donate to these organizations because they need it, and they need it now more than ever. Because during the pandemic, they weren't able to have their fundraising events that they usually have. They weren't able to get out in the community and to raise money. And a lot of the companies or individuals that they typically would get money from were affected financially and maybe couldn't afford to give this year. And so we said, this is not the time, a time where we can pull back. If anything, we got to do more. And so the first thing we did this past year during the pandemic is give away that $500,000 to the local organizations, and it obviously meant a lot to them, but it was the right thing to do, and we're just really happy. And it goes back to the question about Outback Steakhouse and the conferences and all those things, right? And as I mentioned before, just being able to be a successful organization that will be sustainable for many years. We've been around for 35 years. We've set up this organization to be here for another 30 years or however long they have postseason football. and and at the same time, being in a position now, different from when we started out, where we can afford to actually donate monies to the local organizations and have that kind of an impact. So that's probably one of the most rewarding things that we have achieved over the years, is getting the bowl game to a point where we can not only do the things we started out to do, but to do additional things like the charitable giving initiative.
Hey, Mike, Abby Hope here. I know
Hey,
this may
Abby.
be a long answer, but everyone thinks of the
Well,
Outback Bowl.
I give lots of long answers. So
But everyone thinks of the Outback Bowl as a one-day event on New Year's Day. In reality, there's a whole lot more that goes into it, right?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we kid, that that's our most asked question. People say, "What do you do?" I said, "Work for the Outback Bowl." "Oh, what do you do all year? Like, that's a real job?" Or it's that kind of thing. So, and my friends, of course, tease me for working one day a year as well. Except if they saw my golf game, they know that's not even true. Yeah, it is. It takes. We have a full-time staff that works year-round on the game, and then we bring in additional people, interns and such, to help during the few months leading up to the game. And then we also have dozens, actually hundreds, really, of volunteers that serve on our board of directors and other various committees as well. But it takes a lot of work. I mean, we do probably about over the history. At one point, we probably had over 20 events that we did throughout the year. Right now we're probably around 15 events that we do leading up to the game. And I mentioned some of the events we do during the week of the game, bowl week, to entertain the teams and the fans and so forth. But in the showcase the community, we do a VIP events during the year and so forth. And so all those things need planning. They need sponsors. We have to raise money in order to pay the universities our committed amounts to them, to be able to generate funds to do the donations to the charities, obviously our expenses as well. And so, there's just a lot that goes into it, and the planning, the man hours that it takes to do things. I give one example, things like a flyover at the game. When you look up at the end of the national anthem and there's some jets flying over and that kind of thing, those jets flying over the game literally took months of planning by people submitting paperwork to the Pentagon and whatever service or is it military service supplied the aircraft, getting all that in place, working with the FAA. We have volunteers that actually coordinate with the flight unit that comes in to do it. We don't have any planes right here, so the jets have to come in. I think 2 years ago they came in from San Antonio, Texas. They had to come down here. They had to get permission from their base to do it. They had to fly down here. They had to be housed at McDill Air Force Base. We have to coordinate with that. We have to put up the pilots and their support people in a hotel for a couple of days. They do dry runs and things like that. And then we have our volunteer liaisons that work with them on the timing of them flying over the stadium. And they actually are up in the towers of the stadium during the game. And they have to time out like how long it takes for the person doing the national anthem to sing the national anthem, so that they can time it so that the planes fly over right at the end of the national anthem. And so we have to understand that. And then the person on the radio with the pilots actually sings the national anthem to them along with the person on the field singing the national anthem, so they understand the timing. So the jets that are circling around in Tampa Bay, a few miles south of the stadium, know when to point their nose north and start coming towards the stadium at a certain speed so that they get there at the right time. And so that little 3 seconds of thrill that you see as their planes are flying over took a lot of people, a lot of meetings, a lot of man hours just to coordinate that 3 second little thrill that people get to see. So that's just one example of the things that behind the scenes of any major events, sporting events or otherwise, that have to take place to make something of that magnitude or this magnitude happen and be successful.
I know you mentioned earlier the economic impact of the Outback Bowl is a $1.1 billion number. Generally speaking, can you tell us how you come up with that number? And do you think the people in Tampa Bay are aware enough of this billion number that's ultimately positively affecting them?
Yeah, we've tried to do a better job actually recently of letting people know what events like this mean to the community, because I think it's important for them to understand how valuable they are, and also to get more support for the organization and what we're trying to do. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. A lot of people, as I mentioned, they don't really pay too much attention to the back story of events like ours. It's a 3-hour football game to them, and then they're on to something else, and that's fine. They don't understand the inner workings, and it goes back to understanding that there's people that work year round to put on a game. They think you show up, you make sure the officials there, footballs are there, the lights are on, and that kind of stuff. But they don't understand the background of it, and that, again, that's fine, because every major event goes through that. But the economic impact, we measure that through the various surveys, as well as data that we have of fans coming to town, spending their monies and so forth. Our game brings in typically on average about 30 to 35,000 out of market visitors to the game, as well as of course local. And so those out of market visitors come from all over the country. Pretty much every year we sell tickets in at least 40 different states. And so regardless of who's in the game, it could be Florida in the game. We still sell tickets in 40 some states around the country. And people are coming in from all over because they're fans of college football. They're fans of those particular teams that live wherever. And so those people coming in, spending money in the hotels, the restaurants, the attractions, renting kayaks, whatever it may be, they're coming in and spending all this money. And so we try and do the best we can to try and understand how much they're spending, and really do it from a conservative standpoint, because there's no exact science in determining economic impacts. You see them all over the place on different things, but we know from our history, and then also looking at the numbers from other similar events to ours and what they typically produce from an economic impact standpoint. And then, we obviously and extrapolate that to, the the number of years that we've been playing the game. And it's, we feel it's very, very defendable, very, very conservative, if anything, the numbers that we're using. And the key is that it's highly, highly significant number every single year, regardless of whether it's 30 million, 35 million, 40 million, or 45 million in a particular year. It's really, really significant. And the businesses around the area will absolutely tell you that, because they know the difference of having a game. And just like this past year, with the pandemic, you take the hotels and all that. Well, we've been around for 35 years, right? So most of the people working in hotels don't even know what it's like to not have a Outback Bowl. But they do now because of the business that they lost. This year, even though we had a game, we had a very limited crowd that we were able to have at the game, and just that difference itself, you could see the difference in regards to what it produced from a hotel standpoint. They were very happy to have what they had with our game, but it obviously wasn't a normal year, and so now they go back and they say, oh well, gosh, this was a lot different than a normal year. Now we understand how much the impact that they had over the years. And of course, I say that, but other times too, they know when they're sold out around the bowl game, they obviously know that the bowl has a huge impact in that. Maybe they didn't know quite as much, exactly how much, until they had a year where it was a lot different.
Hey, Mike. So I'm a huge college football fan and a Gator alumni, so we've definitely made our way over to the Outback Bowl a couple of times. But pretty much as far as I can remember, there was the BCS system. I'm told there was some kind of poll system back in the day. But back in 2014, they switched over to the college football playoff system. Yeah. And you guys had the opportunity to throw your hat in the ring to be one of the, I believe it was 6 bowls chosen to be the championship game, and you guys didn't. Is there a reason you didn't, and what are some of your thoughts on the current college football playoff system?
Well, it's it was something that was going to happen whether we wanted it or not, right? One of the concerns of having a playoff for many years, decades really, was the fact that They didn't want to hurt two things. They didn't want to hurt the bowl system, and they didn't want to hurt the regular season of college football. The thought was, and I think still is, that college football has one of the most important regular seasons of any sport, because it's not a situation where a huge percentage of teams get to be in the playoff. You take some sports, college basketball is a good example. You got 68 teams that go to the March Madness, right? That's an awful lot. And again, we all like doing the brackets and all that stuff, and it's fun. But as long as you have a winning record, you have a chance probably to potentially get into the March Madness, which is their playoff. Other sports, NBA, hockey, not as much baseball, but a lot of other sports, even the NFL, has, probably half their teams get in the playoffs. So you have, in college football, it was always a situation of, you had to be one of the elites to even get a shot at a national championship game. And so, for many years, as it go back to like our game when it first started, there was no playoff of any kind. It was just the bowl games and then the polls. And you had a lot of times you had split decisions, but, it really made the bowls really powerful, significant because, depending on how you did with the bowl games was just depending on, where you would be ranked at the end of the year. Would you be ranked 2, 3, whatever? And so, then they went to the coalition was the first thing they started. And that was the predecessor to the BCS. And each time they got things a little bit better in regards to trying to figure out a fair way to sort of determine it. But again, there's always going to be that controversy. I think the funny part is that people think that, having a playoff would solve all the issues. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't in any sport. I mean, even in college basketball, if you seeded the teams differently and took the same 68 teams, seeded them differently, matched them up differently in the brackets, you would probably end up with a different winner of the national championship in most years, or at least the final four teams would be different in most years, because it's so much about the bracketing and how they seed them and so forth. And so, there's nothing perfect, if you will. So with college football, the idea was, it's the regular season is really important, because if you, at the time, if you lost even, you lost one game, you might still have a chance to get, playing for the national championship. You lose 2 games in the regular season, I don't care who it's to, you're probably not going to get a sniff. And so that was sort of the feeling, is that we don't want to diminish that. Every game, means something in college football during the season. And so, obviously, eventually they went to the 14 playoff, and that's, I think it's worked pretty well. Obviously, some people don't like the fact that some of the same teams are there every year, but at the same time, we're at a point now where some of these teams, have such great programs, and the fact that it's so much easier now for players to transfer and so forth and go to whatever school they want to. Some of these teams are, the rich are getting richer, right? I mean, they're, if you want a national championship ring, well, if you go to Alabama, you're going to get one, some point during 4 years. So, the key is to try and figure out a way, to get players to want to go to some other schools and to mix it up a little bit more. As far as, our game, when they put out the RFPs, if you will, for different organizations to apply to be a potential college playoff game, if you will, they had some really high and strict parameters in those rules. And at the same time, I think, we felt very much that we sort of knew what games that they really wanted to be in. And so I think a lot of the bowl games felt like, it didn't really make sense, number one, to apply, because they sort of already knew what games and what cities they wanted to be in. And then the second part is the fact that you have to give up a lot of your control on what matchups you can have and so forth. So for instance, the games here, if you're if you have hosting a semifinal game, that's all good and fine. But in a year that, say, an Orange Bowl or somebody isn't hosting that game, you don't have as much say, and some of the bowls don't have any say in what teams are assigned to them. Whereas, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like, well, we know we're going to have a Big Ten SEC matchup every year. And we know that's going to be a heck of a matchup, and those guys are going to really come to play. So, but are we going to be, you want to get in a situation where we have to commit and try and figure out a way to raise even more money to pay for two teams that we have no control over getting, and could end up with teams that, aren't really going to do well for us in the years that we're not a semifinal game. And so, again, it's a combination of the fact that we had to weigh, what the benefits and the negatives were to it. And then also the fact that, what are the chances that we're even going to be selected, because they, they pretty much already aligned themselves with what they're going to do, right? They took the four bowl games they already had in place with the BCS, right? And then they just added two others, which were, in bowl games that they pretty much already had their sights set on. So, our perspective was more of a situation of, we have a really great thing going in regards to, for the conferences. We have a great thing going for our community. We're producing every year. We're creating a great economic impact every year. It works well for us. We've got two great conferences. And so, we're very happy with what we're able to do and where we're at in the bowl structure. And it's worked very, very well for us. So we have absolutely no complaints at all, looking back, as to our decision as to whether or not we want to throw our hat in the ring or not, because we're doing all the things that we really wanted to do, and doing it in a very positive way.
I guess I just have a quick follow-up to that, and you're welcome to break news if you want to. Do you see an expansion to an 8-team college football playoff coming in the future?
Well, a lot of people talking about it. It's funny. You go back and again, the initial discussions of a playoff, right? As I mentioned, that people were talking about for many, many years. And back then, even it was a situation of, how many would you have, what would work, and everybody, of course, has their ideas on what's going to work, and they'll say, oh, we'll just make the bowls a part of it and all this kind of stuff. It's like all they want is to be able to have a bracket, like they have in basketball. It's not that simple. Bowl games aren't structured to be a part of that kind of situation, where you're playing week after week after week. Teams aren't going to come into a bowl game for a week and do all the fun events and activities around the game. If they got they might have to play like 3 more times, things like that. So, it's a different kind of a setup. I think that, this really, it doesn't really, work for everybody. And so, I just don't, again, it's great to have the playoff and the people want to do that, but, they're going to, no matter what number you have, they're going to continue to increase it. The NCAA basketball tournament was originally, I believe, 8 teams. It expanded very quickly to 16, and then ever since then, expanded. In fact, I remember it wasn't that long ago that it went from 64 teams to 68 teams. Now, what was the argument for going from 64 teams that we got to add 4 more? I mean, what is that? It's because who's ever on the bubble, at whatever point, is going to complain and say, well, they should have been in too, because they were closer. And my idea about it is the fact that the more teams you allow in, the more of an argument that teams that are on the borderline that get shut out are going to have to get in. So as an example, right now you have 4 teams, right? So very rare, can you lose 2 games and get in, right? It's pretty much undefeated teams, or maybe, teams with 1 loss, okay? You expand to 8 teams, I'll guarantee you that some of those teams are going to have 2 losses, okay? Almost every year, right? Well, now every 2-loss team could say, well, we got 2 losses too. Their record isn't better than ours, so we should be in there, okay? And so, now you've really expanded out the number of teams. And so, it's one of those things, and even when they announced the 14 playoff, they said immediately, and it happened immediately, the media and other people immediately were saying, well, it should be 6 or 8, and if you go to an 18 playoff, I will guarantee you, I'll put money on it. I will guarantee you that there will be teams and people within months, if not a year or so, who will say, yeah, we really should have gone to 16. Why don't we just go to 16? And that's where it's going to be. So going back to the previous discussions before they did the actual playoff, that one of the big arguments and one of the big fears in the industry was it's a slippery slope. And once you open that door, there will be people who will want to expand it, expand it. And if they do expand it, that cuts into the original worries of hurting the bowl system and the regular season. The more they expand it, the more it hurts regular season. So as I mentioned before, right, it has to be, the very elite, it has to make every game in the season has to be important enough for these high-end programs to, feel like they got to win those games because they may not make the playoffs otherwise. Well, if you expand to 8 teams and teams with 2, well, now, if you can lose 2 games, that's not that big a deal. You can get in. Heck, there might even be a team that loses 3 games if they play a tough schedule and gets in. Well, that, all of a sudden now, you've hurt the credibility of the regular season and the importance of those games. And so, it's just one of those things, again, a slippery slope where, sure enough, people are going to want more, and they're always going to want more. And they're always going to be able to come up with some kind of reason for having more teams. I don't know what they're going to do. We're not involved in that. None of the bowl games are. They don't ask us for our input on that. But they will determine, what it's going to be. And, it seems like they're going to look very, very hard at doing 18 playoff. And I'll go back to one other aspect too. When they put this together, they used to do 4-year contracts with all these BCS deals and all that stuff. This past time, they did it for 12 years, and they did it on purpose. They said, okay, we're going to do the playoff, a 14 playoff, but we're going to do it for 12 years because we don't want anything to change. We want to give it a really good run at it for 12 years before anybody comes back and tries to change it, because we want to see how it really does work or not. We're not going to keep, doing something different every 4 years. And that was one of the reasons they did that, because they knew people would want to expand it immediately and knee-jerk, reaction thing. And they wanted to give it time before they even considered expanding it. And now, of course, it's getting down, towards the tail end of that. And, they're going to take a look at it, and we'll see what they come up with. And whatever they do, we'll adjust from our perspective and, try and just be able to continue to do what we're doing.
Okay, so kind of extrapolating, so with the playoff, you guys are in a great situation, like you said, where you have a solid sponsor, solid location, and consistency. There is a constant flux in the bowl season and sponsors. I know some games have lost money, and it has some people in the media calling for expansion of the playoff, elimination of bowl games. Obviously, I think that's a horrible idea, because I even remember speaking to some people and they got their swag bag and everything from the game, and it was just an awesome experience for the athlete. So what is your vision for the future of the bowl system going forward?
Well, like you said, I think a lot of it's going to just depend on what they decide with the playoff. If they do expand the playoff, obviously it's going to have an effect on the bowls in some way, because they're going to have to determine how they can live together and still contain the bowl system and be able to have it, work, continue to do what they're doing. So it's really up to, what the conferences are going to decide on the bowl system. And see how we have to adjust if we need to. Like I said, it's been different over the years. There's 40 bowl games now, so it's a lot different situation than it was back when there was 13 or 14 bowl games. And the dynamics of it have changed quite a bit, and we've adjusted with it, and we'll continue to adjust with it. And I think other bowl games will as well, and we'll see what happens. I think the bigger concern, probably with the bowl system in general is, because of the expansion of having so many games and so many teams going to games, that we're at a point where of saturation, I think, to the point where it's going to be, you know, you might have some bowl games that don't really survive the current structure even, because you know, there's so many, and you know, having enough teams to quality teams to play in those games isn't guaranteed every year, because it fluctuates each year as to how many teams are eligible. So I think that's more, a little bit more of a concern on the short term. Long term, like you said, you know, what's going to happen 5 years from now when the current contracts run out for the playoff. You know, that'll just depend on what kind of moves they make in regards to expansion.
Hey, Mike Schulze, Director of Communications and Sponsorships for the Outback Bowl. I just want to thank you for coming on tonight. It's been a great segment. And, you know, something that I want to add too is that I really, you know, enjoy the game, but just the whole pageantry, you know, about the pep rallies, about the marching band, the mascots, the flyover. What you told about the flyover is unbelievable. And I've already circled my calendar to open up 2022 with the Outback Bowl. So again, I want to thank you. And with one closing comment, how can people get in touch with the Outback Bowl for more information to become sponsors and to buy tickets?
Well, we're in a situation now where we will start selling tickets to the public in late August, around the start of football season this year. We are planning for a normal year in regards to event schedule. We're planning hopefully on a normal situation with the game and no limitations on fans and so forth. So right now we'll be on our regular time schedule of selling tickets through Ticketmaster starting around the end of August. We do have corporate ticket packages that we sell throughout the year, which we're selling now. They're club seats to the game, and you get invitations to some VIP events during the year, and you get to renew the seats each year, sort of like having a season ticket to the game. We have a lot of fans in the local market here who go to the game every single year. It's just part of their New Year's tradition, because they know they're going to see a great game. They don't care who's playing. And so those packages are sold directly through the bowl office, and you can get more information at our website, outbackbowl.com. And you can call the Outback Bowl office and ask about the membership packages that we do, and our VIP events and so forth. And then, but if you just want some tickets to the game, they're, like I said, they'll go on sale through Ticketmaster in late August, around the beginning of the season. And we look forward to seeing everybody on New Year's Day.
Mike, again, I want to thank you again on behalf of It Sports Magazine, Leo Haggerty and Rob Creed and Abby Hope, and of course, Adam Schnaps. And again, we'll look for you 2022. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, please let us know. Okay, Mike?
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. Nice meeting everybody. Abby, great to see you. Good luck in your lacrosse games.
It's Sports Magazine. It's sportsmagazine.com TV.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep. You're very welcome, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.